Good evening and welcome back to the shop here in beautiful Canterbury, New Hampshire. Looking forward to slowing it down a little tonight and going back to fundamentals to make a beautiful, sweet little project. Actually, a sculptural, almost taking you back to the whittling days of making a simple letter opener. I thought back to a time back in 1983. I had the treat of going to Africa. And I remember going to Kenya, Africa with a youth group project. And oh my gosh, it was an eye-opener for a kid from Lowell to go to Africa. To go from the big city to landing, you know, where you're seeing the acacia trees and the landscape. It was just an incredible trip. But one of the things I remember there, and I actually picked up there, was on the way out, there were all kinds of people selling beautiful carvings. And when I think back, man, what a deal for so many of those things. Beautiful hardwood carved rhinos and elephants and all kinds of stuff. But one of the cheaper things you could get was a letter opener. It was nicely made, but you could tell it was probably something close to ebony and worked beautifully. But I remember having it for a while and then it broke somehow or other. But I remember thinking, when it came to making a letter opener, I was thinking, okay, that's kind of a nice idea. One of the main things is selection of material. You want to choose a wood that's hard enough and you want it to be beautiful. You know, you want it to have that kind of feeling that when someone picks it up, it's just it's a exclusive experience. Yeah, that's our word tonight, exclusive. It's a rare kind of enjoyment that, you know, you get that tactile experience with it in your hand, but it's able to keep an edge, even though it's wood. So you want that hardness to keep that edge. So I wanted to think about the comfort in the hand and the stylishness of it, and also selecting good material. Now, I went back to thinking about, oh, what have I got hanging around? I've got a lot of scraps. You could use something like maple. That would be fine, like hard maple. Or maybe you have some other precious little gems. I remembered this chunk that I had up on a table in the library, right where I meant to keep it. Look at this thing.
So
this
fortunate.
Is a chunk of heavy weight. And I wanted to confirm what it was. I thought it was cocobolo, which is a Central American hardwood, quite hard, beautiful. Smells kind of spicy when you cut it, but the dust is notoriously irritating. So some people have like allergic responses to it. So you got to be real careful when you work with this kind of stuff. But I also wondered, could it be Brazilian rosewood, which it resembles, but it wasn't quite red enough, but I wasn't quite sure. So I made a little trip on my little errands today over to Goose Bay, our friends, and I went in there and looked at all their exotics. They have a lot of billets in there, and I talked to Carl and we compared and contrasted to a number of pieces, but it turns out what I have is indeed cocobolo, and that's a nice chunk of it there. I don't even know what it's worth, but I forget even where I got that. But I also have this piece, which was more easily sawn up, and look, it's got kind of a big defect there, but it had a good end down here, and I thought cocobolo would be beautiful to make a nice letter opener out of and play around with. But what are some other woods? I've got some purple heart over there. That's pretty hard. We've also got the gaboon ebony, but man, this stuff is so pricey right now. A piece not much bigger than this over there at Goose Bay is $100. Just
Wow.
It's gone crazy. The gaboon ebony. There's a test in the wood world, if I know a lot of you have heard this before, but bear with me for those who haven't. The Janka hardness test, Janka, and it's simply a measurement that must have been a guy named Janka, came up with a long time ago, where they compressed a ball, a hardened steel ball, that was 0.444 inches in diameter. All right, I don't know why they chose 0.444. If someone knows, please comment. Why wasn't it just 0.5? Anyway, the 0.444 ball, they have a compression test, and they measure the pressure it takes to compress and embed that ball exactly half of its thickness into the material. So it would be 0.222 depth into that material. And as soon as it hits there, I'm not sure what they have to register that, but it kicks off and it says, that's the hardness of this material. So in pressing that ball into cocobolo, it takes, let's see, 2,950 pounds pressure. So that's pretty hard. Just to give you a reference, some of the more common woods that we know, like walnut, is 1,000 pounds pressure. Cherry is 950. Ash is harder, it's 1,320. And white oak is 1,360 pounds pressure. How about hard maple? More or less than white oak? What do you guess? It's a little more. You're right. Or you're wrong if you guess low. It's 1,450 pounds of pressure. So what about white pine? Our friendly little white pine. That's only 400 pounds pressure.
Yeah.
Pretty soft, but really, so you don't want to use that when you're not trying to dent things. Well, what about Gaboon ebony? Harder, softer than cocobolo. Cocobolo, remember, is 2,950. Well, Gaboon ebony is actually a little harder. What's the actual? It's 3,100 pounds pressure. And when I was over at Goose Bay today, I picked up a billet of something that I had never seen before, although I know it's been around. And I wrote it on here for you boys and girls. Can you say this? Catalogs. Catalogs. Look at it. It looked just like the Gaboon ebony in the billet here, you know. But then when I planed it, you can see the difference. There's usually a waxy coating on this stuff. They dip it to keep it stable while it's getting to market or whatever. So here's the Gaboon ebony without the wax, and here's the catalogs without the wax. Pretty dark, and if you wet it, it gets almost black. I mean, this is actually called Mexican ebony. So it comes from Mexico, and here's the sapwood, quite yellow and light. But anyway, I'm gonna try this. Surprisingly, this is harder and less flexible. It's one of the strongest woods in the world, it turns out. Wow. And it is, on the hardness scale, it's 3660. So it's 400, almost 500 harder than Gaboon ebony. It's over twice the hardness of hard maple, to give you reference. All right, that's enough of nerding out on the hardness scale, but it's always fun to know what we're dealing with here. Let's have some fun. We'll make a letter opener out of our cocobolo. You can design it however you want. You can make it really contemporary, whatever. I went on to Etsy to see what other people were doing, and pretty cool. There's some people, check it out. There's one guy on there who's making these hard maple ones, and he's laminating on both sides with a darker exotic wood. So not as much cost there. And then he shapes it down. So only the exotic wood is on the outside of the handle where it's thicker. And then it goes down. There's another guy on there making these very elegant kind of sculptural, something like mine, but I didn't copy his. I decided I was gonna make my own and make it for comfort in the hand and to look pretty sweet too, you know. But these letter openers range in price, seems to be from $30 to $60. So if you had a way of kind of, getting them out, they make, not like you're going to make a big business out of it, although those guys seem to be making a little side cash, but they make great gifts. This is the kind of thing that you can whittle away and get a jump on Christmas or that special person's birthday. And every time they pick it up, they'll think of how you painstakingly shaped and curved and thought about every time. That's what's great about a wooden gift. Every time the person picks it up, they remember you. And don't you want to be remembered? No, they're going to remember the love you put into this thing. So we're going to make it, we're really going to care while we design this, okay? All right, so you got a clean slate though. But generally, you don't want to make it like a sword. You don't want it super long. And you don't want it like little tiny that is not workable for a letter. So, I don't know, I was looking at one guy was going 10, but that felt a little too much. So I figured like a 4-inch handle or so, and then a longer knife edge. I just kind of went with feel to how we've used them in the house. And I made this as a template, as a rough pattern out of white pine. Super easy to shape, so I could play around with my design and decide on my attack before I started cutting into the good wood. But you're getting to see, I had a little here, you're getting to see what I did, and the design I came up with. It's pretty basically a knife. It's not revolutionary. But one thing I discovered was in designing or sketching it, I was going to put curvature on the top as well, which you could come down, but I thought it was actually good to just leave the top straight, and I don't often like to leave straight lines on something this sculptural, but by leaving that straight, it gives you kind of a relief or reference for all the real sculpture that's going on here. And then from this perspective, the knife edge is thinner and the handle is heavier and wider, so it's almost roundy, and it fits right there in the palm of my hand nicely, almost like the ice cream scoop we made, wow, more than a year ago. I should have given you a reference for that in case anybody wanted. All right, so we are going to sketch this out, but the way I sketched it out was I just came here and I decided I would make it about 9 inches long, and so that's about there. And the material I had, let's see, what did I end up doing?
Hey, your mic just went funny. Oh, it's back, okay.
Okay, so the material I had, I just figured about 1 inch or so in width at the handle. And there I was going to just kind of sweep it up. I wanted it to be rounded kind of at the end here. Okay, and then the handle would come up and just start to sweep upward here. And then at the end, I know this is my point, so I want this to be kind of a sharpish point to get inside that little letter fold. And then it sweeps out and then comes back in like this. Just a little sweep down in, so when you're holding this, your fingers kind of go in an indentation here, and you have the nice kind of knife shape. Okay, that's it. Then I went and sawed it out, and I got this. Let's see how close we came to this one. Look at that, pretty close.
Wow.
Okay, so just a gut feel, okay? Now you could make yours different. You could come down a little bit if you want on the top, not make this so sweepy, and have a rounder handle, a fuller handle, whatever. You could make more of a dagger so it's double-sided, pointed. I'm just trying to get that one edge pretty sharp, and that's going to be the cutting edge, okay? So I went ahead and bandsawed that out, and then I didn't even clean up the pattern. I just left it like that. Actually, yes, I did. I just quickly sanded it. But that's the template, okay? So I'm not going to bother doing that. That's pretty basic. But if you want any more measurements on mine, it's 1 inch there, where it gets skinny, it's 9/16. Where it goes back out again, it's 5/8. Okay, and the handle itself, right to this lowest point right here is right about 4 3/8. But the handle, you can see it's kind of short there. I would say it's 3.5 inches or so for the major roundish of the handle. And then the blade itself is then going to be about 5 from the center top. All right, so there we go. That's our template. So here's our material. We're going to now sketch out our shape for our custom designed letter opener right on here. And here's my Cocobolo. I've got kind of a check, a little wane here where the bark was. So I'm going to lay it in here like this. And I can bring it back a little bit because I've got some extra there. And I'm first going to saw the profile in this case. And then I'll saw the narrowness of the blade. Just that order seems easier in this case. All right, so I've got a yellow lead in my 0.7 Graph Gear Pentel pen. Sorry, I didn't give you the link for that. Graph Gear 1000 Pentel. And I have like a waxy yellow lead, because if you use regular pencil on this, it's hard to see. And actually, I had to scuff up the Cocobolo. I don't know if you noticed me just do that a second ago, so that this line would even show up. It's kind of, the thing about Cocobolo is not only is it hard, but it's got like an oil in it and also silica, some silicas in it, which make it kind of tough on the tools. Not extremely tough, but some of these exotic hardwoods have a lot of silica closer to the bark, and they can really dull tools. I remember bloodwood, I had a project once, and I swear I felt like I was bleeding tool edges by the time I got done. Just joining and planing that stuff was miserable, so I never want to do that again. But Cocobolo has a bit of that, but not quite as bad. All right, so now we've got, look at that, nice little profile. So we're going to saw out in this dimension, and then we'll come back and get the other. So let's head over to the bandsaw. There we go. We've got our profile shape, and I'm not going to bother cleaning that edge up. We'll be working on that in a second. But then for the top view, I'm going to go ahead and scuff this up a little bit. Oh, I should mention, the blank I'm starting with here is 11/16 thick. Now you can make it however wide you want. You can start a little wider if you want a more bulbous handle, or a little thinner if you want kind of a sleek, or your material's not as thick. No worries. So I took another piece and I just drew the handle shape. So I'm thinking about the top of the handle. If I'm looking down from the top dimension now, this is the profile, but now if I'm looking down from the top, I want it to be bulbous at this handle part, but then get kind of narrow, like a knife edge. So I want it to be about end up being like a 1/4 inch wide out here. So I made this template and cut from just one side. And what I'm going to do is flip this over and we'll get, so I'll match it up with this edge, nice and flush, with one edge here and get it close to the bottom and the top. And now I'm going to draw with my yellow lead right here. Okay, so this is going to be where I'm going to get a little roundedness at the handle, bottom, and then down the side. This is fun. You can do this whatever you want. And then we'll flip. Do the same from the other side. This reminded me a little bit of the funny Harry Potter wand that my youngest son got when he went to Universal Studios years ago. And I always thought, you know, it was some kind of cast plastic or something. It was nice, but I always thought, man, I could have made a better one than that. You could do that too if you have any children or grandchildren in your life who are into that kind of thing. You know, any kind of thing like that. So there you go. So just by flipping that side to side, I now have, let's see what we ended up describing here. It is just a touch over a 1/4 inch. So if I just saw to touch that line, that will be good. And then I'll just bandsaw from the top. And I don't care if it's not perfectly in symmetry. It's going to be shaped and sculpted a little bit from here. So let's head over to the bandsaw. I'm going to make this cut over on this side first with the fence. So I'm going to bring the fence over and cut right in there. Okay, I need a light, I think. So I'm going to come set my fence just to touch the line on this side. So I'll make that cut first, then I'll move it over again to get here. So I'm just going to go as far as I'm straight and then move the fence and get the last bit of the line. Then I'll move the fence and get the other, and then we'll start cleaning it up. All right, here we go. All right, so let's come on back to the bench. And we're going to need a few shaping tools here. So we'll bring out the trusty spoke shaves. How about a chisel? And what else? We've got our rasp. And we've got our 8-inch file. And a card scraper. And a sandpaper. The knife edge is actually, you know, more delicate, and it's pretty flat and true on the sides, and it looks to be Should be right. Yeah, that's good. That's a 1/4 inch. That's good. And the handle's still the full width, but we want to round this handle up. So I think it's easier to do the handle first. While this is still straight and true, we can just clamp it in here and get a good grab and do all the shaping on the handle. Then we can clamp more easily and do the final shaping on the knife edge itself. All right, so let's make a few little guidelines on here quickly to just get a little rounding effect. Let's go ahead and make a center line. That's always good, so that we know where we're rounding up to. You know, I meant to do this before I cut the shape the other way, if I had gone down there. I can make my center line right up here. This is going to be the knife edge right here. So when we shape our knife edge, we're going to come right and leave that line. Okay, and we'll come back over the top. And I'm just eyeballing this about the middle. And then up here, this is going to be the back of the blade. And I am going to bring this kind of thin. It doesn't have to be a sharp edge. You can make it sharp as well. So you could backhand the letters open too, if you prefer that. But that looks pretty good, just like that, okay? All right, so once I get that, now I'm gonna make some marks on the side here. Let's say, if I was gonna round this around, I would make somewhat of an octagonal shape. So I'll just go right about halfway, maybe a touch more, and make a guideline like that. Same thing on the other side. And then I'll carry that same, I could go a little more here because I've got a wider handle. And the same over here. Okay, and then the top, similar action there. Just going to make that. And come on down here. So this is going to be removed rather quickly. I don't have to think about it too much. I'm just going to take off that facet, that corner, all 4 corners. I can get it into the vise. And here I could use a chisel, probably, and get it off there pretty quickly, making sure I'm not going to tear out the grain. But I've also got a spoke shave that's set kind of heavy. And this removes wood remarkably fast. So we're almost to our lines already. So with a spoke shave can be a quite aggressive tool. So I have these 2. I usually leave this one heavy and my 151 is finer. If you want to know what these are. This is a number 51. It's basically the same old Stanley model, except this one has the knurled knob adjustments. It's a little easier to adjust with that method. This is more of a manual adjustment, and it's not that hard to get used to. I use this one for years until I get this one. So I'll keep these at different thicknesses. And this will do the roughing, that'll do the finer work. We don't have time to change blade depth. All right, then we're gonna turn it around. Same thing. You can feel this stuff's pretty coarse, but it's not awful. Now I'm gonna just actually I'm gonna get a better grip on it. It would be embarrassing to break it in front of everybody.
You're among friends.
That's true. I'm among neighbors and friends. All right, so here we go, right over here. Speaking of neighbors, I think I'm going to do a visit over to my neighbor's house one of these days and post the video. My neighbor Ed, who some of you have heard me talk about, has quite the extreme basement, and I've actually donated some slabs to that basement and some, remember our weights? But that would be a trip to take you down there because it's unbelievable. And you can see those those pieces in, those slab tops in place. A butternut, walnut, pretty nice. All right, so now let's see where we're at. We've just created the faceting to our guidelines, pretty close. Now that we've got it there, we're going to freehand and bring in our finer spoke shave, and we're going to take the peaks, ridges of those facets, and we're just going to feel our way along and eyeball it. I already kind of knocked the end off. See how I just kind of rounded that? So now let's go back to the handle, and here we go. You might choose to do this with an abrasive. Maybe you like using, like belt sanders and stuff, but I just find this to be more controlling, and I'm a very controlling person. Would you say? You didn't comment on that. What do you, actually, I'm not.
What does one say to something like that?
I don't think I am.
I don't.
Of course, the controlling person never thinks they are, do they? No, of course you're not.
I think that's a challenge for every single person.
I am kind of controlling when it comes to, how I want something to be made. I do have to admit that.
Different settings.
But that's the good thing about making something like this. You are the boss. You go to your shop, you're the boss. No, maybe that's why we go to our shops. Is that why? All right, so it's like Jackie Gleason said. Remember that? I'm the boss. You're nothing. She was talking to, what was her name again?
I don't know his wife, just I forget her
Somebody
name.
knows. Oh my gosh, why can't I remember that? Anyway.
It's not Gladys, is it?
Somebody, no, not Gladys. Shoot. Somebody tell me, who was Jackie Gleason's in The Honeymooners? What was his wife's name? I know he had Norton and Ethel. Alice. To the moon, Alice. Yeah, it was like, and he vented on her one night, and he's like, I'm the boss. You remember that? I'm the boss. You're nothing. I'm the boss. You're nothing. And then she goes, oh, so big deal. You're the boss or nothing. Oh my gosh. All right, so now I'm going to start blending down into the knife blade. Coming over the top here.
It's getting shiny. It's beautiful.
It is. It's oily. I can't really feel the oils, but it's got a nice texture. Okay, now we're going to come in this way.
Cool.
And it's also got a nice hardness. So we're going to facet this underside, finish off the handle this way. Let's get a little more aggressive. Now we'll get to finish it again. You can actually get pretty close to approximating the shape you want just with spoke shave. That's why this is kind of fun. This would be a great project to do with kids too. I think kids can handle spoke shaves really well once they get the hang of it. You're just keeping that sole on there, and it's a great way to get them involved in woodworking. And you could start with a white pine and have a blast. I know our kids like making swords and kinds of weapons, Look how that handle's coming together. We're already getting, this could be in Tiffany's. I can see it now. All right, so
Pretty.
now we're transitioning into the blade edge. I could do a little bit more there. Let me just touch it up a little bit more. I want to get it so you can see it. I'm going to hit it over this side. I'm trying to get rid of most of the flats. Okay, now let's transition into the blade. Now that we've got it like that, we're going to finish it with the rasp and then file and card scraper. So down in this area, we want to now grab it this way. Now that we've got our handle pretty much described, we'll get a good bite on it this way. Now, I need a little assist here. Let me get a block. use, let's see, oh, here it is. I got this little pine block that will help. I just put that there. I need a support so it doesn't tip down. That's just going to hold it from tipping. And I'm going to come in here. I'm going to use the aggressive one to start with. Yes. Just clean off the bandsaw marks. Now I've got my center lines, so I'm going to angle it and come down to my knife edge on this side, get kind of close to it. Then I'll taper it on the top as well. Got to be careful when you get to this point to let up pressure a little, because you could snap that even though it's pretty strong. Okay. Now I can go to my finer one. Just feels more in control, less tearing feeling. Just getting right up to that center line. Okay, flip it around, and we'll hit the other side. Oops, I want to lean right up against that pine. There we go. Take the coarse one. Again, go light at the top. That feels like it. Is that tearing or just, it's just that I have the blade extended quite aggressively. That's okay. All right. Okay, so now we'll get to the finer. You could make several of these once you got the hang of it. I could see making like 5 or 6 of these at one time. You know, just the music on. And they make great little gifts. Or shoot, you could sell them at the fair and have some dinner money for you and the camera lady.
How about some ivory inlay, Tom?
Ivory inlay, wow. You could do some inlays. Ivory, who's got ivory? Salvaging piano keys.
Mother of pearl.
Yeah. Yeah, you could play around. If you guys do this, please send photos. We will be having some kind of photo share in our forum, right? In the neighborhood? Very soon. Oh, okay, so check it out. It's starting to take shape. See? We've got our handle. We've got our blade is thin. I'm not quite all the way. I'm going to do a little more there. Got to take a little more up this side. And then you can see where it's a little rough in here. I can't quite get the spoke shave in there, so I'm going to just rasp quickly that clean. So let's put it right back in. Just touch up that knife edge.
I'm not sure if you talked about this. I don't recall, Tom, but David's asking coarse versus fine spoke shave. Is it a matter of how exposed each blade is?
Yes, yeah. It's just how aggressively I set the cut. So this one's set quite thick, take a heavy cut, and this one's just closer, very fine, more controlled, and you get less tear out. See how it's just more civilized here, where this one's taken off an aggressive layer. So it's really what you want to do. It's almost like there's a lot of things in woodworking. I mean, the simplest example is moving through the progression of sandpaper. You know, you've got a coarse sand on one grit, and then you move to finer and finer. Well, the same can apply to cutting edge tools or even rasps. You know, rasps have a coarseness or files. You move to the finer and finer. So I'm doing that with my tool edges. I do the same thing with my block planes. I have a couple different block planes, and you may have seen I keep one set heavier, and then I keep my Lie-Nielsen typically set finer. So I don't have to mess around when I pick them up. I just switch them out depending on the kind of work we're doing. Okay, that's pretty close. Now let me just show you a little of the filing. Here's we got our Nicholson number 50 I'm going to use here to clean this up in the neck here. This is going to transition right from the handle into the blade. Doesn't want to take too much pressure there. You want to be careful. I mean, you could break this, but that's why we chose a good hardwood.
How sharp do you hope to go?
I'm going to get a sharp edge there because I don't want to waste time, opening letters.
I figured you had a plan.
What?
I figure you have a plan.
Yeah, don't you think it should be sharp?
For sure.
Yeah. You could
Otherwise,
put a little...
it's just a piece of wood.
Yeah, exactly. So I got a nice little transition there, and then I'm going to use the file here. I should have shaped the handle more. I should have done a little more of this before I started doing the blade, because now I've got to hold it with this kind of rounded blade and do a little bit on the handle, but no worries. Okay, so I'm getting that nice sweet transition right there. This is where your index finger is going to kind of be, so we want that to be nice. Look at that sweet little, the way it sweeps from the bulbous handle into the blade edge. Now, once I've done the fine filing, I'm going to come in with the card scraper. And this look at this Cocobolo scrapes really nicely. This is removing the filing marks. And it also, I can use it to finesse right up to create a sharp edge before the final sanding. I'm right to the yellow line on this edge. I got to take off a bit more on the other side. But even if it's not perfectly symmetrical side to side, it's okay. It's kind of part of the charm of the handmade. It's a beautiful organic object.
So, can you talk about how you would
I'm going to flip.
inlay mother of pearl in that?
If I was going to inlay, I would put it in while it was still more rectangular at some point, so that when you did the shaping, and I would probably do it up in this area where I'm not rounding it too much, because you'd have to get it deep enough so that you didn't cut it away while you were doing the shaping.
Danny's curious between butterfly joints or double bevel marquetry. Either of those ways you would?
If I was going to inlay this, I wouldn't use double bevel marquetry, because that's usually reserved for veneering. Like you're veneering a whole panel and you're pre-cutting it into a layer. I think with this being a solid, I would be trying to put a solid into a solid. So I would be using, I'd probably cut my shape in the inlay material, like the mother of pearl or whatever, and then I would, usually you can double stick tape it there and knife around it, and then you can plunge out with a small bit and chop to the knife edge, and then you're going to epoxy it, or I always forget the name of that glue. What's that?
Star CA glue?
CA glue, yeah.
Star Bond?
That's what I used on the guitar neck. It worked beautifully. Plus you could use dark brown or whatever if you had any voids, and it would fill the voids. Okay, so then I would now card scrape. Look at how this comes up. It's a lot like Ebony. It has that kind of waxy texture, and it's really nice hardness. It's almost the exact same hardness on the Janka scale. See, look at that. So we're getting that good knife edge. This is where we can finesse, get it really close to a sharp edge. And then lastly, we'll flip it around and work on the handle a little bit more. So you can also just hold it in your hand and work it this way to final detail it. You can really see what's happening and move it around to you. This is really fun because you're just taking little bits, but you're adjusting it every time. And that's getting to be quite a sweet edge right there. Now the handle, I wanted to rasp out just a little bit more. Get a little bite on this. See, it's not quite as held. I should have done this before I did the other, but it doesn't matter. We can do it. Just note that you want to do more shaping on the handle while you still have the full knife edge. Then you can go to the shaping the knife edge more aggressively.
Tom, Joe's asking if there's less worry about grain direction on harder woods.
Not really, Joe. You still have to be concerned with grain direction, especially the more fibrous, harder woods, like, think of Wenge. And there's definitely grain direction with Ebony, and there's grain direction with this as well. I'm always kind of going in the direction that I think favors the natural, what I guess to be the grain direction. Okay, so we do a little more there. Hit it with the file. And then card scrape. You get the idea. We'll just keep going until we get all our little blending points here from the handle into the knife edge. That's pretty sweet right there. Starting to take shape, huh? Isn't that nice? You go from this square chunk. Just a minute ago, we had this. Now we've got this sculpted handle. Now, once I would get it to this point, I would go around and make sure I got rid of all my bandsaw edges, and I like just going around and tuning it up this way with a good card scraper. Just keep moving it. Sharp card scraper makes kind of a pleasant work. You want that transition to be smooth and nice. We're getting close right there. Then I would take some 150 grit. You could take a palm sander like this. It's going to be noisy for a second. I won't do a lot. Here we go. Okay, I'd go over it with that. That pad gives you kind of quick work. And then hit it with 150. You know, after hitting the whole thing, then I go to 220. And you start to see it. It's going to start to look a little bit polished because of the oils in it, similar to Ebony. And then I go to 320. And I'm starting to see it get shinier. Let's just do a little bit. I'm kind of rushing this. You take a little more time, making sure everything's silky. Now this is my design. You could have had a hard edge there if you wanted to make a cut and do a little carving. Distinguish the handle from the knife edge. By all means. Whatever you like doing. If you want to put a little birdie on there, that's good too. All right, so then I would round the handle as well. See how that's getting kind of sweet. Now I've got one I did earlier. I took it all the way to the 320 and polished it up. So essentially the same. So we've got two letter openers here. And then now to finish it, you know, some oil finishes do not actually respond well to oily woods like this. Teak is an oily wood as well and can present some problems. But one of the things, lacquers have a real hard time adhering to this. It's also from what I'm reading, due to the silicas in the wood as well, with the oils, but I personally think it's more of a factor of oils. So before I ever finish anything like this, I'll usually just quickly wipe it with acetone. Also, before you glue up the joints, I'll use acetone too. And I will use typical, tight bonds for the joinery. I find that works fine. But you may have to read up on that particular species. Might be advisable to use epoxy. But regardless, it's usually recommended to splash it with a little acetone. I'm going to just put a little on here. And then I'm going to wipe on the most foolproof of finishes and that adheres beautifully to it, our good friend shellac. And we've got wax-free orange here that I mixed up in November. So this is be still fine. I've got a 1.5 pound cut there. We're going to wipe it off, and this will flash off really fast. It kind of draws the oils out and takes the surface oils off. That looks black already, huh? And then we'll get another rag quickly and wipe on some shellac. This is the beauty of shellac. You can wipe it on, you can brush it on. Little project like this, perfect to wipe it on. I've got some orange on there to highlight some of the orangey in the cocobolo.
Oh gosh, that's gorgeous.
Let's flip it around. I am obviously going to have to touch it here, but it dries so fast that you could get a few coats on. Now this first coat too acts as a sealer, and it's going to kind of seal in those oils. So you're going to start getting that sealant, and then I would use probably just 1 or 2 more coats, and then I would wax it, and you could burnish it with a little steel wool, and there you go. Check it out. That side's looking dry again, but let's just... So it's going to get rich like that and stay that way after a few coats. Pretty sweet, huh? So we got our handle, our very sculptural, very contemporary. This should be in the Modern Museum of Art.
We didn't bring out an envelope to do a little demo, did we?
Oh no, but trust me, that will cut. We went from having a sketch, a concept, to a template, side view, top view, and then you could make a rough model, and then once you're feeling good about it, you go to your final design. It's just one element. It's almost like the joy that people get out of carving spoons. That's a huge thing. You just have to get this one piece of wood and you carve this elegant, functional tool. And every time you pick that up in the kitchen, you're reminded of that experience that you had. I mean, it just makes stirring a pot or eating your bowl of Jethro porridge just that much better. Be sure, if you enjoy this content, to please consider subscribing and share and like. Spread the love.
Thanks for joining us.
All right, everybody. On behalf of the camera lady and myself, I look forward to seeing you next time.